It's a way to it's really hijacking our road money and giving it to people that aren't road users that aren't paying that tax. I mean, bus users aren't paying the road tax. The bicyclists don't pay a tax. Pedestrians don't pay that tax. So they're taking, our road funds and actually working against drivers and how they configure a roadway. And in fact, in many cases, shrinking that or even closing a road altogether, which is even worse.
I ran into something similar. There was, it's like a seat it's the seat, what do you call it? Not the seat belt, but the one for the airbag. That thing won't go off, and they told me I had to go to the dealership to get that sensor, and otherwise it just stays on and it doesn't work. So, and no one else can fix it. It's
Well,
crazy.
that's what we're seeing with this that it's like being technologically held hostage, right? By all these chips that they put in the cars. And just like Rachel described with that battery, they make it so that nothing in your car works and functions unless you pay them. It's like extortion. Unless you pay up the extortion money, you don't get to use your car anymore. And so that's where it comes down into a property rights issue for us, which we've been very strong on from day one here at Turf. Because this really all these issues actually do come down to and have an element of property rights, like eminent domain abuse. If you're taking someone's land for a public road, but then you privatize it, is that right? Is that a proper use of eminent domain to go steal land from somebody against their will? Because ultimately that means it's against their will when they have to use eminent domain, so that somebody else can profit from that. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? So we've been involved in that fight for a while, but then now we're starting to see these new fronts, these new threats. And this is a big one because do you really own your car if you are being kept from repairing it? And if you can't operate your car without the blessing of the dealer or the manufacturer. So, another good example I thought was, and it was in the Blaze a year or two ago, where they highlighted a couple that had bought a used EV, like a Ford Focus, for their daughter, and they spent, $9,000 for it. And then, they immediately the battery light, whatever, check engine light comes on, they go take it in, they find out the battery doesn't work anymore. So they're like, "Okay, so just replace the battery." So you thought it would be simple, kinda like Rachel thought she was gonna go in and just pay 50 bucks and get a new battery. Well, they said, "Well, I'm sorry, we don't support that battery anymore." Like, they literally don't make a battery, and this car was only 8 years old, and they literally don't make the part for you to actually keep your car, and they said, "We can't without the battery, you can't drive the car." So they don't make it anymore, and then, so they basically just spent, $9,000 for a car that they can no longer drive, and they said the replacement battery cost would have been $14,000. $14,000 to replace a battery for a car that's only worth 9,000 that's only 8 years old. So you talk about I mean, you talk about cattywampus and having things completely, tilted the scales in favor of these auto manufacturers and the dealers and against consumers. Right to repair is a burgeoning issue that is absolutely on fire right now, with the ability of these companies to use their technology to weaponize it against the drivers who are supposed to be the owners of the vehicle, which clearly we're not anymore. So we're looking to get some legislation drafted in Texas to protect us from that, and that's on the legislative priority list from the official Republican Party of Texas platform now, which is fabulous. So we're very excited about that. And we're working with TPPF, which is Texas Public Policy Foundation. A gentleman named Grayson Gee over there works for their policy center that deals with the property rights issues. And he did a really great debate with Competitive Enterprise Institute that's in favor of letting companies do this to drivers, apparently, not really for consumer rights. And he's just right on this issue. And we would love, of course, to be able to work alongside one of the premier Texas conservative think tanks to help get this legislation across the finish line for sure.
And this is something that we'd be saying, like, is this something that, like, would be in the next session, or where would this
Yes.
type okay,
Next
perfect.
year, when we come into session January 14th of 2025.
That's great. Yeah, I know 'cause, then I was thinking about the, what do you call it? The auto zones, and they'd all be out of business because
They would. It would, and this does absolutely threaten our independent auto repair shops as well as auto parts stores, because they don't want you to be able to work on your own vehicle, fix your own vehicle, buy parts for your own vehicle. And I think what these companies are ultimately doing is they're gonna shoot themselves in the foot. My kids are very involved in 4-H, and we're involved in the STEM project, and robotics is a big part of that. And we already know from some of these kids that have studied this, and we were listening to some of their presentations just a few months ago at the state contest. And we had no less than 5 of the top 20 presentations were all on 3D printing. And one of the things you may not think about much is that they can, with a 3D printer today, you can literally make custom auto parts. Right now, you could do that. And now the printer cost has come down so much. Now, the plastic beads that you put in them to create the part is really where your cost is, your ongoing cost, kind of like a printer with the toner, you know? But at the end of the day, you can buy them under $200. And if you can buy the pellets to go in them, which are also pretty inexpensive, um, you can custom make your own parts. So that's this is gonna lead to, is people are gonna innovate other ways to get around this if they don't work with us on coming up with a good compromise, piece of legislation to get this done and make it fair for drivers and protect consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. I know they could even do it someone was I was, an article, and they could do homes. There's the
They
3.
can. I've
Yeah.
seen the videos. They do homes. In Austin, Rachel, they did a whole slew of homes with cement pellets that create a house, and they can build a house in 24 hours using a 3D printer.
That's
I know.
amazing. That's cool. The thing is, I think what is so concerning, and obviously Terry's been a one-man band for 20 years and has really been doing a great job to sound the alarm on all of this. But, we just take it for granted. I mean, I just
Yes.
jump in my car and I expect that it's going to start and that I'm going to go from point A to point B and not be interrupted. And the threat is real, and I think that that has been so part of the frustration is to wake the people up because I guarantee you and we saw it firsthand where we went to DC to talk to them about the remote kill switch, and you start talking to these offices and the horror on their face when they realize, like, this remote kill switch is real. "What? You're gonna kill my car? The government is gonna kill my car?" I mean, they just literally are just horrified by the thought of that. The problem is that most people are just so, unless you come from, I call them refugees from the blue states, like California and stuff like that, where you've already been seeing a lot of this implemented, people just, and that's when I love to have those people in the present when we go and give presentations because they give validity to everything that Terry and I are saying and what we're seeing because it just seems like, I don't know, we're very proud in Texas and everything's bigger and better in Texas. And you're not going to California my Texas and this isn't going to happen and nobody's going to tell me what to do. Well, here they are, buddy. So you better get your 6 shooters ready in the
That's
form of
right.
coming down and testify because it is happening and you just don't have a clue about it. And so I think that that is just what is the biggest hurdle. It's not that because people are horrified when they hear the material. It's getting them to understand that this is really a real threat. And I think that's the biggest frustration. Wouldn't you think, Derry, as far as
Oh,
just getting people
absolutely.
engaged and involved and
And the other thing we find, and you know this, Rachel, having done this with me last year, which is when we had our last session was 2023, and we're in the committee, and it's just Rachel and me and an army of lobbyists. And that's all that comes into these committee hearings normally, until a Democrat wants a bill that's gonna take your travel freedom, and every now and then they'll bust people in from Vision Zero to come testify in favor of all these leftist Marxist road policies. And we're just kind of caught flat footed usually because our people are off testifying in education or the border bill or election integrity or, abortion bills, whatever. And so we can't get them interested enough in transportation to care about shoring up their freedom to travel. And this is an area where you won't be able to get to the Capitol to testify. You won't be able to get access to a downtown area if they implement a congestion tax like they have in Stockholm and in London and in other cities where they literally are trying to keep you out of downtown areas, and you'll have to pay some massive tax just to get access to anything in downtown, which in this case, downtown Austin is where our capital is. So when you look at the big cities, like when we just had the election, right? There's this big map of Texas and there's a lot of red, but there's still very significant pockets of big blue. And that is Dallas Fort Worth area. Now, Fort Worth, Tarrant County is getting more back to the red zone these days, which we're very grateful for. They have a great county judge there that's helping that happen. But we still have a lot of blue around there, and we have a lot of blue in Austin, a lot of blue in San Antonio, and a lot of blue in Houston. Well, just Houston alone is over 3.5 million Texans right there. You got San Antonio, that's another 2 million. You got the Metroplex, you're getting close to, another 5 or 6 million. And then you got Austin is all close to 2 million now as well. So that's millions, tens of millions of Texans who have city councils that are very blue in Texas. and they have control of your city streets. And what they do with those city streets and your sidewalks and your parking spaces and the amount of capacity you have to drive on those streets, they are shrinking that footprint because they have an ideology that is anti-car and wants you out of your car. And in fact, they don't even want you to own a single family home. They really just want you in a high-rise apartment somewhere where you don't even have a yard for your kids, where you maybe have enough room for a little teeny dog. But that's it. They don't want you to have a family. They don't want you to have kids. That's why when I laugh about how am I going to grocery shop on a bike, well, they don't want me to have kids. Certainly don't want me to have 10 kids. That requires a big old van to carry, drive them all around. So, they see that as a threat to their, like, next to no population global agenda of the World Economic Forum and International Monetary Fund, and, you just name all those three-letter global agencies, well, and even the UN, all of them want you to own nothing, eat bugs, and they think you'll be happy. Well, those same types of people that share that ideology are on full frontal assault in our Texas cities, our big urban areas in particular, and some not so little urban areas. There's some smaller cities. They all get lobby and taught how to do this because they just like to wield power. Even if you have a red city council in a small little rural area, some of these cities are still doing this. They are shrinking your road footprint and putting in dedicated bike lanes and buses where there's not even a bus system half the time, where they have, these dedicated buffered lanes and these taking out your road lanes and putting in these extra wide sidewalks or green belts or sticking out a jutting tree just to put interference in your way of driving. And that's where the road diet portion of our legislative priority comes in. They literally want to put you on a road diet. If you currently have a 4 or 6 lane road, and some of our city streets are that big too, the big arterial roads are that wide. Like, for instance, Congress Avenue, which goes right up to our Texas Capitol. It's in downtown Austin. It's basically 4 to 6 lanes, depending on where you're at on it. But if they go and take out 2 of those lanes and make them a dedicated bus lane and even take more space to go put in a bike lane, one, you have trouble making right turns because now you've got to deal with a ton of bicyclists that could potentially be outside your peripheral view and you risk hitting people. Some of them outright prohibit you from turning right, which is what happens in downtown Houston with all of their bike lanes and bus lanes that they have. You can't even cross them when the light's red. So that creates a stack up and a backup that, during rush hour is impossible. You could take 5 light cycles just to make a right turn. Then they put all of these things where, of course, we're all about road safety. We all want safety, but they put these rules in like they did. I want to say it was last session. It might have been 2021, but they put in one where you can't make a right turn if there's a pedestrian that hasn't completely walked across the crosswalk yet. So again, they're elevating pedestrians over cars. And while we're supposed to give right of way to pedestrians, if they're clearly 2 lanes over from you and you need to make a right turn because it's finally clear for you to do so, you should be able to make that right turn if the driver judges that it's safe, rather than have to stack up traffic and wait until every pedestrian's done crossing the street. Well, by then the light's going to be green.
Right, you have a
So
back.
yes, and so we've seen, lots of issues all across, Texas in big and not so big cities, where these cities learn from the Texas Municipal League, the TML. It's been the big taxpayer-funded lobby group that lobbies for more power for cities and taking away our freedoms in essence. And so you don't have to be a Houston or a Dallas to hear from their lobbyists and to get their boilerplate ordinances and go pass it at your city council because they've convinced you that you want more walkable cities because they think that's going to get you more sales tax revenue for people to stop and shop at your stores. But what it really does is it means they also take out parking spaces. They make it so miserable for a car to get down to those stores that people just stop coming because you've made it so inhospitable to cars and the way that people prefer to get around. It doesn't make sense anymore. And so we saw that on 11th Street in Houston. It's in kind of a downtown area, but it's a great alternative road for people that don't want to be stuck in the traffic on I-10, which is right nearby there, Interstate 10. So the city of Houston came in and wanted to take away, it was a 4 lane road, 2 lanes each direction. Great surface arterial. People could get, where they needed to go on short distances on there without having to get on the freeway. The neighborhood loved it. And really, this was a Democrat neighborhood. So these were Democrats on the city council going against their own Democrat base when they said, "We don't want you to put in a bus lane. We don't want you to put in a bike lane or extra green belt or, a extra wide sidewalk for people to walk. We need this road to be robust and we need this capacity or else we're all going to just have massive congestion and huge traffic snarls and have a lot more trouble parking if you close down these roads." And so that's what we saw happen there. We saw it on Broadway in San Antonio. We're seeing it right now in this little city called Texas, Kemah, where the city council decided to up and close 6th Street downtown, and it just about shuttered all the businesses down there. The businesses sued, and the courts here agreed that they needed to open that road back up, which was a huge victory for those business owners. But it shouldn't take a lawsuit by a bunch of businesses that are about to go under in order to protect us from these types of leftist road policies that want you out of your car or try to manipulate your travel by shrinking your road footprint. And, this is intentional congestion. And when here we're all trying to figure out how to fix our congestion legitimately to allow for more efficient travel. And these people are working against that 24/7. And those are the same little mayors and the same people that come into the Texas legislature during session to testify in favor of the litany of bills the Democrats have already refiled this session that we already had to kill last session. They just keep coming back. I mean, I have 3 of my bills filed by the good guys and about 30 bills by the bad guys that have already refiled the same bad bills again to continue this type of interference on driving in these public roadways. And it's got to stop. And that's why we made it a legislative priority. It needs to be a priority.
That's awesome. They're definitely they're fighting for, the rights. I mean, it basically comes to our individual rights.
Yes.
To have the right to, free speech. We should have the right to our own property and the things that we work hard for. And that's what it really comes down to.
Well, not only are they shrinking it for bike lanes and things like that, they're literally making green spaces where they're planting
Yes.
grass and flowers. And because the roads are ugly, the roads are racist. Pete Buttigieg said that. He said the roads are racist. And you're like, you've got to be kidding me. And what's mind blowing to me is that the very neighborhoods that they're claiming to help, they're the ones that they're hurting. They're hurting them when they can no longer get their goods and goods in and out. Their
Congress.
commerce that it kills their commerce. And we're seeing streets that are literally that are taken over. I saw one in I mean, they have them here too. I can't think of a specific one, but I know like when I was in Madison, Wisconsin, they have a whole street that is shut down and like LGBTQ stuff, flags and stuff are literally painted on the street like a memorial and you cannot drive over that street. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And so, I mean, it's just rampant. It's everywhere. And, you cannot take our tax dollars to build these roads and then keep us from using them. I mean, that's ridiculous too. So I don't
It's a
know.
way to it's really hijacking our road money and giving it to people that aren't road users that aren't paying that tax. I mean, bus users aren't paying the road tax. The bicyclists don't pay a tax. Pedestrians don't pay that tax. So they're taking, our road funds and actually working against drivers and how they configure a roadway. And in fact, in many cases, shrinking that or even closing a road altogether, which is even worse. And we say that the state has a compelling interest in this because some people will say, we have a lot of Republicans, the squishy middle Republicans that like to come up there and say, well, we don't want to, local controls better. And the closer they are to the people, that's a better form of governance. So we at the state shouldn't be coming in with a big hammer and telling these cities what they can and can't do. But we have to go back and take a step back a little bit because all of our cities and counties are what they call a political subdivision of the state. They only operate at the behest of the state of Texas. So the other way that we think this dovetails a little bit, just like our state highway system, if there's one part of it that's not functioning well, it affects the entire system, right? If you have, I-10 in Houston so jam-packed that you can't like get a car on there, well, that's going to affect I-45. That's going to affect another state highway. That's going to affect, this and that. And eventually it all comes down to if a city's road is the same thing when they tried to mess up 11th Street in Houston, when they tried to mess up Broadway in San Antonio. Those are big, major arterial roads that carry a lot of traffic during rush hour. If you start messing with that, well, that's eventually going to put all that traffic back onto the state highway system, which in this case would be I-10 or 281 in San Antonio. So all of it plays together. We can't always pretend that we can have a little silo where a city just has their own little jurisdiction and their own little fiefdom, and that nobody else has a right to tell them what to do with it. Because all those city roads will play into our state highway system, especially in the urban areas. There's always a state highway that, is right nearby these downtown areas. A lot of times a federal road too, which would be our interstates. So they can't just say, well, we want federal money to fix this. We want some state dollars to help us with this and that. But then at the same time say, back off, you don't get any jurisdiction over this. And I think it's absolutely incumbent upon our state legislature to step in when cities are acting in a way that is adverse to the freedom of travel of all Texans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, like, I really enjoy talking to you both. It's definitely eye-opening, and I've learned a lot about transportation, and I really hope that other people listening start looking into it and trying to see, what these bills are. They can now what's the best way for them to get more information? People want to really know more about this.
Obviously, our website, which is texasturf.org, Texas spelled out, TURF as in freedom.org. And we actually have a really handy tab on there called the Grassroots Action Center. And you have to go on and get signed up for our email alerts because that's going to tell you when and where things are happening. So you want to get on our email blast. That's good. But then also you can go to this Grassroots Action Center tab, and we have something called session resources, and it literally will show you every good and bad bill that's ever been filed over the last 20 years, every session. And we also have a wrap up of that session. I always write, an article that talks about kind of the highlights of what happened. We have a report card of every legislator and how they voted on transportation bills that we identify before they vote on them, which ones we want them to vote yay or nay for, and how well your rep did on that. And they get a grade, A through F. So you can see all of that on our website under the Grassroots Action Center on the texasturf.org website. So we would encourage people to get engaged and join me and Rachel at the Capitol so we're not the only ones in the room when we're filled with a room full of lobbyists and city mayors and county judges that want to take your freedom to travel and give themselves more power to pick the winners and losers of who gets to have efficient travel and who doesn't.
So,
One
yeah,
thing I want to say, this last session, obviously Terry Hall is known by the lobbyists and the legislators because she's been there for so long. Well, I was an unknown coming in,
Oh,
and
nice.
we dress very professional when we go, and so they thought I was another suit in the room until I testified, and I said, "And y'all are only listening to the suits in the room." Well, you would have thought I had thrown cold water on all of them. They were like, "Oh, she called," but I mean, they are. It's just ridiculous, and we don't have the money to throw at these legislators. But meanwhile, we're gonna have to live under whatever rules they come up with, and it's just disgusting. You know what I mean? I just want to know where all these people live that enact all of this stuff, because how in your good conscience can these legislators pass these bills knowing how harmful, and some of them I don't know that they really understand. That's part of the problem too, is because they don't just put something out there in this huge bill that's just gonna slap you in the face. It's very incremental. And so that's the other problem, is you've got incrementalism. And, just like when they were trying to pass the mileage tax out of there, and the chair literally said to me, "Well, don't you think it's not fair that the EVs don't have to pay a tax?" Well, sure, then do a carve out. If that's really what the mileage tax is about, then do a carve out. Because yeah, they aren't paying the gas tax at the pump, but I'm okay with paying my gas tax at the pump. I know what that is. I'm fine with paying that. To do a carve out. But of course, that's not what they want to do, because ultimately it is about the ultimate control at the end of the day. And they want us all living under these rules. And we didn't talk about it, I don't think, but we're going to look at the income of the driver and stuff. Maybe we talked about it last time. But anyway, I just want to know where all these people live, because I want to come live in their neighborhood, because I am determined that they are exempt from all of this mess that they're passing, because it's so ludicrous. No one in their right mind would pass.
Well, you would actually have your hair set on fire with this one then, because they actually do get exemptions. So we found out years ago, this is probably back in like 2009 type time frame, where a big investigative report happened with one of the I think it was like one of the TV stations up in DFW, where they outed the fact that some of these toll authority boards literally jet set over to Austria and all of these, great places to go visit for a vacation. And they were literally not in any of the meetings for this conference of these toll authorities. And they caught them, on camera, sightseeing on the taxpayer dime at these very expensive, venues and everything, to supposedly study toll road policy or whatever. Well, that was one of the things, all these little taxpayer funded junkets they were doing on our dime. But the other thing they also exposed in this same time frame was the fact that the North Texas Tollway Authority, and at the time, the Harris County Toll Road Authority, would give free toll tags to all the members of the board that made the decision and made the call on like toll rates and contracts and all of that. And they gave out free toll tags to the state reps and the state senators in that area. And even to certain, however high up the food chain you were, like if you were a senator versus a state rep, you'd actually have members of your family that could get free toll tags. And if you're on the board of these toll authorities, you get free toll tags for life. So they are exempt from the very decisions that they impose on all of us. It's similar to what happens in Congress, right? All the congressional staffers and all these federal employees were somehow magically taken out of Obamacare, but everybody else had to live under it. So that's how these people operate. They always find a way that they can dangle a little carrot and get those votes, and they round up the votes for what they know is bad legislation. It's a bad vote, but they give them something in return. And I think this pay to play and this cronyism and gimmicks like that, they should absolutely be outlawed. There's no way that gifts like that should be given to any of our state legislators when they are voting to impose it on us, but get to exempt themselves from the consequences of that.
And here's the kicker, like Tassie and stuff, that is our taxpayer dollars that are funding them, that they're turning around and giving our tax dollars as gifts. I mean, the whole
Mhm.
thing's just ludicrous. I mean,
That's
so
right.
we
Nobody
have
pays
lots of work to do.
our toll bill, right? No one's paying our bill. And we have the same thing on State Highway 130. They were giving $100 million a year of our gas tax money at TxDOT. They were giving it to the truck companies to subsidize a lower truck toll rate because the privatized toll road was charging so much money that truckers couldn't afford to take it. So the state incentivized truckers to go use that toll road to bypass the Austin traffic on Interstate 35, which is a parking lot 24/7, and used our money to subsidize the truck toll rates so that they would incentivize them to go take that road. Meanwhile, you and I don't have anyone paying our toll bill or paying for a free ride over there or a subsidized ride. So, when the government has this kind of power to dole out and pick who the winners and losers are, we know that we've lost one, control of our government, and two, it's not a fair system that's equitable for everybody. And that I don't like using the word equity anymore because of what the left has done with that. But at the end of the day, that isn't fair. The way that they're setting up these incentives and subsidies of some, but not others. So we need to make it a system that's fair and affordable for everyone, or nobody gets the freebies and gimmies, right? They need to make it so that it's affordable travel and efficient for everybody. And we need to do that by abolishing these toll roads because honestly, a free flowing general purpose lane carries more traffic than any toll road ever will.
No, definitely. Well, I appreciate you joining us again, and I know we'll definitely love to have you back. Maybe in the next couple months as you get closer to legislation time and see what like new bills are out there and what are some of the craziness. I'm sure there's going to be some more crazy things that they're going to try to push through.
Sure.
There always is.